It is also, and I'm excited to announce, it is also our first annual Rebecca Benaroya lecture series. And Mrs. Benaroya, I know, is away. She's in Palm Springs. We're recording the evening for her tonight so that she can see it when she gets an opportunity. But I do want to say, even though she's not here, I want to thank her very, very much for her continued support. She's a longtime member of Ezra Bessaroth, and she's been a continued supporter for many, many years. God bless her. She's 100 years old. I want to wish her well, many, many more years. And muchos iguanos, exactly. And all the best to her and her family. There were several people that participated this evening in preparing things for this evening and for this weekend's events. I'm not going to mention all of the names. I just want to simply say thank you to all of you that helped out and participated with us. After tonight's speaker, you're going to also be able to enjoy a beautiful wine and cheese bar. So stick around, Charles Sean a little bit, with your friends and family. We're welcome to have all of you as long as you want to stay, but not past 9 o'clock. So on to our speaker. Rabbi Dweck. Oh, actually, one last thing. I'm gonna say before I announce him, I want to he's speaking several times. Rabbi, you're going to be so tired when you get on that plane on Sunday. But he's speaking there's several other opportunities that I just want to mention real quickly. He will be speaking again tomorrow night at our Friday night dinner. If you haven't signed up, it is sold out. But it's great to have a full house for that. He'll be giving the sermon Shabbat morning here. He'll be speaking right after Kiddush on Shabbat as well. Speaking during Sudah Shalishit Shabbat afternoon. And also he will be speaking at, for all of you night owls, he'll be speaking at 9 o'clock p.m. Motzei Shabbat at Merkaz. And looking forward to that. And he'll conclude Sunday morning here at Tefillah at 8 a.m. with Tefillah. And then, of course, right after that, we'll have breakfast and some closing thoughts. However, this evening, which you're all here for, he's going to be speaking, of course. And let me just say that our speaker this evening, Rabbi Dweck, is the gentleman. Are we good? Okay. Our speaker, Rabbi Dweck, is the senior rabbi of the S&P Sephardic Community of the UK, the country's of former Sephardic Chief Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. He has an MA degree in Jewish education from Middlesex University in conjunction with the London School of Jewish Studies. In his capacity as senior rabbi, he oversees the Sephardic community's religious works, rabbinic staff, the Sephardic Beit Din, and the Sephardic Kashrut Authority. He is also the deputy president of the London School of Jewish Studies, a president of the Council of Christians and Jews, and an ecclesiastical authority to the Board of Deputies of British Jews. Rabbi Dweck also serves as a member of the Standing Committee of the Conference of European Rabbis. Rabbi Dweck is a sought-after speaker and teacher in the UK and abroad. His digital presence has global reach through virtual classes, social media activities, a mobile application, and podcast. To find out more about the projects coming out of his office, you are welcome on your own time, to visit his website. It's www.seniorrabbi.com. The topic for this evening is why Israel is the most important of Jewish questions. And it is my great pleasure to welcome Rabbi Joseph Dweck.
Thank you, Jeff. No pressure. I want to, before I begin, I want to, first of all, thank Rabbi Ben Shlush for his wonderful invitation, for his kindness and welcoming me. Rabbi Ben Zaken, it's an honor to be able to see you and greet you. Joanne, thank you for all of the work that you've done in the planning for this trip. Especially mention Victor and Suzy Al-Hadef. It's been such a wonderful Hachnasat Orchim on my very first entry into the city, and I'm so grateful for your hospitality, for your care. And I must say, I'm looking out and I'm grateful that on, what is the day today? What day are we today? It's Thursday. It's Thursday. Thursday night, Erev Shabbat, and everyone's here. I always say the most precious thing that any human being can give another is their attention. And so I do not take that lightly. I'm very grateful to see everybody's come out tonight. And I hope that we can share some thoughts that will be meaningful for us and encouraging for us in our Jewish lives. So of course, we're talking about Israel tonight. I am not a politician, and I'm not talking about the politics. I want to get that out of the way very clearly. I want to talk about Israel in terms of what it means, in terms of what it is that it means to us as Jews. So I'm going to explore that with you tonight. I imagine our social contract is about 40 minutes, 45 minutes max. I'll open up, if you wish, for questions afterwards. And then, of course, I hear that we have wine and cheese, which we do not want to miss. So, that's quite all right. I will, are we good? I mean, I can do it without it. I'm okay to do it without it. That's all right. You can't hear me. I won't be recorded. It's the technical difficulties. Technologies. It's working.
Okay.
We're good. Can you hear me? Okay, we're good. All right. So the question of Israel is one that oftentimes is not really absorbed into our minds and hearts. We are supportive of the state, we're patriotic, we want to be able to send what it is that we can in order to be able to help them. But before we do that, we really do need to understand what this place means to our people. So I'm sure that as Jews, every single one of us has idea as to what it is this place means to our people. And all that I'm going to do tonight is share you mine. That's all I'm going to do. I offer it to you, and as we say in London, if you're not happy with it, you can toss it in the rubbish on your way out. But this is something that for me frames my own Judaism. The first thing that I think is important for us to be able to recognize is that the Torah, looking at it in its core, the 5 books of Moses, right? This is our national text. So whatever it is as a nation, we frame, how it is that we think, comes from this text. And if we look at this text, there is a fascinating element to recognize, and that is that God, a character in the book, mind you, right? He writes himself as a character in the book. God, when he speaks to our forefathers, starting with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, he promises something to them. He enters into covenant with them. And all of it is based on one thing. God never talks to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, interestingly, never talks to them about a Torah. He doesn't say, listen, Abe, I have a phenomenal thing that I want to give you. I've got a Torah. I want to give it to your people, you and your kids after them. Doesn't say that. He says, Abraham, I have land for you. And everything that God speaks about from that moment on to our forefathers revolves around this land. So he promises it to Abraham. He promises it to Isaac. He promises it to Jacob. And then he hires Moses at the burning bush right? This is a very interesting interview because he's hiring him for this job. He calls him over. Moses does not want the job. According to the Hachamim, that dialogue, the burning bush, goes on for 7 days. God was very patient. He knew who he wanted to hire. But what is the nature of the job? What is the job description? Moses, I want you to get them out of this land and bring them into that one, because I promised something to their forefathers. Why do I say this to you? Because it's essential for our people to recognize that the foundation stone of everything that we are is about that land. It is not in any way, shape, or form ancillary to who we are as a people. Now, if we look at Bereshit, if we look at the dialogue with our forefathers as the recognition of who it is that we are, meaning the seminal elements of who we are as a people, we learn a great deal. Another thing to recognize is that when God speaks to Abraham, he does not say, Abraham, I love your thought. He doesn't say to Abraham, your philosophy, Abraham. That's what we need. He does not say, Abraham, I'm going to enter into covenant with you and your students, with you and your philosophical heirs. He says, Abraham, I'm going to enter into covenant with you and your kids. And what are the implications of that? It's also important to recognize that when the Torah speaks to us of the relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Abraham Avinu, between God and Abraham, it gives absolutely no reason for why it is that God should choose Abraham. It just starts, Lech Lecha. Now, it is true that we have tradition, we have Mesorah as to what it might have been that Abraham did, thought, was, that kind of attracted God to choosing him. But the Peshat, the simple reading of the text, which we never lose, no matter how much explanation we put on it, as the Hachamim say, En mikra yotze midei peshuto, which means that a pasuk always can be read in its simple presentation. And the simple presentation is for a reason. The simple presentation has a Kadosh Baruch Hu falling in love with Abraham. Just because. You could ask, well, what on earth? What is that? You can also ask, does God fall in love? But if you ask if God falls in love, you also must ask, does God love at all? And without getting into the theological aspects of that, which I will not tonight, we can do that another time, maybe another trip. That's a Maimonidean question, which I'm very happy to explore. What we can take again at simple face value is that in the book, as he is written as a character in the book, HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves, and he expects us to recognize him as loving. And my friends, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves, he can fall in love, at least in terms of as we are concerned. And he falls in love with Abraham. Now, if any of you have ever fallen in love, and I'm not asking you to share tonight, but nonetheless, if any of you have ever fallen in love, you know that to start to explain why is already a mess. You don't know why. You start to list details and it already falls apart. It just is. It's something that happens with us. That is more than you can fill in a book or 10 books. It's just more than that. Why is that important? It's important because it's unconditional. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's covenant with Abraham Avinu was unconditional. That means you cannot opt out. It is not based on conditions being met. Once a Jew, always a Jew, whether you like it or not. Those are the terms. Why do I say this? HaKadosh Baruch Hu falls in love with Abraham, and he does not simply fall in love with his philosophy. He falls in love with the person, the whole person, everything about the person. And he says to Abraham, you and your children. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees in the face of Abraham's children the face of his beloved. So it's Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and us. And that being the case, it means that the Jewish people fundamentally are not a movement that is philosophical. The Jewish people fundamentally is not a movement that is religious. The Jewish people fundamentally is a family. That is at the core of our people. We are a family. We are a national family. The nation of Israel is a national family. We're all brothers and sisters and cousins. And we have a home. And all HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to do for Abraham was to recognize him and his children and say, I have a nice piece of real estate for you guys to call home. That was his act of love for us. And that is what that place means to us. And that is why he doesn't speak to them about a Torah. We'll talk about the Torah in a moment, but I just want to call your attention to the fact that originally there is no mention of Torah. There is a mention of land. And why is there a mention of land? Because it's about your family, and I want to give them a home. That's my contribution to you. It's a nice place, nice piece of land. On the Mediterranean, there's skiing up north, there's great stuff. It's nice, beautiful, as we call it. Eretz Hamda. Tzvihi lechol ha'aratzot, it says in the Pasuk. It is the most beautiful of all lands. I'm giving it to you. It's a special choice piece of real estate. Everybody wants it. So he gives it. And he says, Moshe, I want not only for the family of Abraham to be secure in that place, I want them to be a free people. I want them to be sovereign in that land, masters of their own lives. As I am free, so should they be so. And so I'm going to make them slaves. Because as the Hachamim say, En ha'or nikar ela mitoch ha'choshech. The only way that one knows what light is by knowing what darkness is. It is in the contrast. It's only by knowing the difference between one thing and another, between a thing and its opposite, that we know anything at all. Which is why whenever we define something, what we are really doing is not telling you what it is, but what it is not. And by knowing what it is not, you know what it is. And so I'm going to make them slaves. And Moses, I need you to take them out of the slave land and into the free land. And that's your job. And what is Torah, if that's the case? Torah is simply a means to that end. That's what it is. He says to Moshe, he hints a bit at it, at the burning bush. He says, I want you to bring them into the land that I promised their forefathers. You're going to make a pit stop. You will serve me on this mountain. That's a hint to the giving of the Torah. Because which mountain were they talking at? Sinai. Right? So it brings them back to Sinai. Why Torah? As Rabbi Nachmanides, he says all of the Torah, the entirety, are what we call mitzvot teluyot ba'aretz. They are mitzvot that are meant to be kept in the land. Now, there are certain things, because we are a nation, and because we are a sovereign people, that we accepted upon ourselves at Sinai, that we do, even if we're not there. But it is meant, its life is enthralled and enlivened by living it and acting it in that place. That's why people ask, how am I supposed to keep Shabbat in northern Russia in the wintertime or in the summertime? I don't know. It wasn't written for that. Okay, we have to answer those questions halachically, right? What do you do when you pass the date line with regard to Shabbat? But that's not what it's meant to be. It's written for people who are living at that longitude and latitude in that land on that place. That's what it is. Again, I want to be very clear, so nobody should say Rabbi Dweck said we don't have to keep the Torah, because people would say that. I'm telling you. I'm being very clear. It's not that the mitzvot are not to be kept outside of it. Has shalom. It's that the mitzvot are at their highest level, are in their most robust form, are at their fullest when it is being lived and acted in that land. So when we recognize that the Torah is essentially a means to that end, how so? If I want them to be a free people, sovereign over themselves, in covenant with me, well, freedom requires something. Freedom requires more than just being able to do what it is that you want. That's perhaps what we call liberty in English. You are at liberty to do what you wish. But freedom is more than that. Freedom is not just being able to do what you wish. Freedom is being able to become what it is that you wish to become, to create the realities that you wish to create, to form what you wish to form. And in order to do that, it requires more than just being able to do it. It requires knowing what your choice today will yield tomorrow. It requires having a framework of reality that is viable, so that you know, if I choose this, what will ultimately be the yield. And for most of us, that's a trial and error endeavor. We can only know so much. So one of the important aspects of Torah for us is that it has become a framework. It was given to us to be a framework, to be a lens through which we learn to see this world and choose from within its lens and choose from within its framework for the most viable life. And if you question whether that is indeed true, if you question whether it is true that the Torah has succeeded in being precisely that, a framework for the children of Abraham Avinu to choose viable futures, recognize that we should not be here tonight in Seattle as a Jewish congregation listening to Torah and contemplating our Jewish future. Because that in and of itself is a miracle the likes of which this world has never seen. Are you with me? We shouldn't be here. I'm coming to you from London. I mean, literally, I'm coming to you from LA. I was in LA a few days ago, but I mean, ultimately, I'm coming to you from London. Who's been to London? Raise your hands. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. Come visit next time. Who's been to the British Museum? If you've been to the British Museum, then you know that every room in that museum practically is a footnote to Jewish history. There is not practically a civilization represented there in its exhibits that we did not see, know, go through, and survive. Perhaps not without casualty, but nonetheless. So whether it's the old ancient Mesopotamian kingdoms, Sennacherib and Ashurbanipal and all of those guys that we saw, we dealt with and went through, whether it's Egypt, whether it's Rome, whether it's Greece, you know the spiel. Been there, done that. There is one thing that has brought us through, and that is Torah. You can say, well, maybe it's other things. You could say whatever it is else that you think that there may be, but consider that throughout all of our sojourns in our collective lives as a people on this earth, and make no mistake, there is not a country in which we have not lived, a language that we have not spoken, a psyche, mindset that we have not absorbed into our national mind. That's the truth. I mean, I just got up from Birkat Hamazon, Victor's house, half of it was Spanish, which is very much like London. We sing Bendigamos after the Birkat Hamazon. Where did that come from? That's not at Sinai. Birkat Hamazon is from Sinai. That we got from Sinai. The Bendigamos came later. There's not a language we haven't spoken. Why am I saying this to you? Because everything changes for us. This is what our family did. This is what their family did. The cousins went there, they were in Baghdad, they were in Berlin. There's one thing that has been with us throughout the entire development of our people, and that is Torah. So if you question whether indeed it has functioned as a lens through which we make viable choices in our lives, question again. It's why we're here. And the amazing thing is all of it was so that we could live in Israel. So of course it matters to us what Bibi's doing. Of course it does. Everybody, we can't help but care about what's going on over there. But what I'm talking about with you tonight is not specifically what's going on over there, but to be attentive to be aware of the fact that it moves you. And it should, because it's where we belong. It is our home on this planet. And it is probably the greatest miracle that our people have ever seen to date. Because not only have we been away from it, has it essentially been inaccessible to us for 2,000 years. Whoever thought that we'd survive for 2,000 years? Seriously, who's going to put their money on it? Okay, we'll go back to the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago by the Romans, thrown out, burned by the fires of the world, attempts of destruction at every generational turn. Who's putting their money on the survival of the Jews besides the Jews? Nobody did. That was the point. Couldn't it? That's why they get so uncomfortable when we're around. Why? Because we don't go away. They have ideas. They plan futures, 1,000-year rights. What do you want to? They plan and plan and plan and plan. We look. I remember that. Now they're in museums and we're still here. And that's the craziness of it. And sometimes, let me say, sometimes the truth of the matter is, if we are honest with ourselves, it's a bit too much for us to hold. It's a heavy weight of reality on our shoulders. So we often like to edit what it is that we're holding. We like to compartmentalize and focus on Seattle, which we have to do, right? As everyone has to do in their own cities and so on. But at the end of the day, when we lift our head and we look around and recognize what it means to be a Jewish person, it's not just Seattle or London or LA or any of that. It's 3,000 years. 3,000 years. Can't even fathom the number, really. I mean, you hear the number, you think about what it really means to be around that long as an identified people knowing themselves till this day. That's heavy weight. Let's be honest. It's a lot. And there's a desire to compartmentalize it. They snip it down into bite-sized chunks. But the reality is that everybody else knows that it's not bite-sized chunks. I mean, the rest of the world out there, they're watching and they're thinking, what's going to be with these people? And then we go ahead. It's bad enough that we've been surviving. And then we go ahead and come back home to the same address that we left 2,000 years ago, where no matter how far you dig in that land, it's got our name written all over it, whatever you find. It's massive. So we even compartmentalize. You know how we compartmentalize? We compartmentalize with focusing on the politics that's going on in the Israeli government, which again, I do not say is negligible, nor do I say it is not important to focus on, but do not lose the forest for the trees. That land was not ours, nor were we sovereign in it for much longer than we are currently. Let us not forget that. Let us remember that we sing Hatikva, simply the hope, that our national anthem is a hope for what? To make sure that Bagatz is working? It should, but that's not the point. That's not the hope. The hope is we should be on Be'artzenu. Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. To take that for granted is a terrible, terrible missight, in my humble opinion. Why? Because that's really what it's all about. It's about being back in that place as a sovereign nation. That, you go, you tell your great-grandparents. I'm hearing wonderful stories in the short time that I'm here about great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents. May their memory be a blessing. May they rest in peace. May their zechut stand for all of us. You go to tell your great-great-grandparents, we've got problems in Israel. What's Israel? What is that? You mean, Israel, Israeli government. What's the Israeli government? What is that? Some kind of lobbying group? No, we're back in the land. We're running the country. Sorry, you said there were problems. Yeah, there's problem. Perspective. Again, to be clear, I do not for 1 minute minimize the local issues that are running in that country. The local issues that are running in our homeland. But overarching those issues, the broad reality of whatever it is that those issues may be, is that we are there. That it has been returned to us. That our great-grandparents couldn't dream what it would mean to say, something, I think I'm going to Yerushalayim for a couple of weeks. Never, ever must we take that for granted. Because I'll tell you another thing, and I say this with trepidation. Who guaranteed that it will remain in our hands? We assume that it's there and it's done. I'm sure that when we had the Beit HaMikdash, we thought the same thing. Whoever thought the Beit HaMikdash would be destroyed? As a matter of fact, they didn't. I'm not going to tell you the story now because we don't have time. That's exactly the story that's told Masechet Gitin about how it was that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. There was Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis was his name. There was a terrible trouble that they got themselves into with the Caesar. And some of the Hachamim were worried that the Beit HaMikdash might come down if we're not careful with this. Rabbi Zechariah was only worried about some halachic issues that people would misperceive. He convinced everybody of that. And in the end, Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because he was focusing on local politics. And we must not take it for granted. And we must remember that before the Jewish people are a religion, before the Jewish people are a philosophical movement, before the Jewish people are a moral and ethical force of good and what people call tikkun olam in the world, before any of that, we are a family in covenant with God that has been running, if you start from Abraham Avinu, for 4,000 years. And that is the central foundation of what it means to be a Jew in this world. What does that mean? What are the literal, practical implications of that? As a Sephardi, I will say to you, and I say this not chas v'shalom to take away or disparage from any one of our brothers and sisters in their approaches, but there is something that has been unique to the Sephardim for a very long time, that I believe comes from the reality of this fact, that we are first and foremost not a religious body, but a national family. And that once a Jew, always a Jew. And that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't choose Abraham Avinu's disciples, but Abraham Avinu's children. That we are all connected, and we are all one family. And that is why, you'll forgive the term, that the Sephardim has always been a broad church. We have had room for everybody. We don't have conservative and reform and all of these other denominations, because when does that happen? That happens when you look at us as a religious body. So if you're going to look at us as a religious body, we're going to determine your sitting within the people based on your religiosity. But if you look at us in terms of members of the covenant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Abraham Avinu, to which HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not say Abraham and your disciples and your adherents, but to your children, in whose faces I see yours. We relate to our people as our family. Now, I'll say, anybody who has family knows sometimes you like your family, sometimes you don't. I mean, if we're going to be truthful tonight, why should we, Sometimes that's the reality. Sometimes you really don't even like to talk to your family. Sometimes you have vehement arguments and differences of opinion with your family. But if you were on one side of the country and they were on the other and they were in trouble and you needed them, you'd probably be on the first plane back to help. At the very least, you can't get rid of them, which is part of the problem, isn't it? Right? That's who we are. And that must be the foundation stone of how it is that we relate to each other. And how it is that we think of ourselves. Overlay on that the law, the philosophy, the religious adherence, and so on and so forth. Overlay. I'm not saying, God forbid, to remove that. Not at all. What I'm saying is understand how the layers are built. What is at the core and what runs above that. And at the core is the family of Abraham Avinu, which we are all members of. And that we have a home on this earth. And that is Eretz Israel. And that in our lifetimes, we have watched miracles, prophecies coming to fruition before our very eyes. Miracles and prophecies that our grandparents and great-grandparents could not imagine coming to fruition. Couldn't write the story to tell you how it might come to fruition. And we're watching it. And as President Reagan said, don't be afraid to see what you see. We see it. And it's happening. So I will say, and when we thought about the title for this, it wasn't as volatile in Israel, I'll say, in all honesty. I might have steered clear from it, so I do. But I will say about that nonetheless. It is disheartening to see what is happening in Israel on many levels. Not just to see the strife and discord and the animosity that people are coming close to even calling potentially civil war. Has v'shalom. It wouldn't be the first time amongst our people that civil war broke out. Why do I say that? Not has shalom, we don't want to see it. Why do I say that to you? To remind us that these are not new things with us. We've been through it all, and we've come through it all. There are disheartening things that are happening within the political system, in the social environment. It's very disheartening. But remember also that Israel is 75 years old. We've returned, we've been there for 75 years, and we expect it to function like it's a 600-year-old country. Why? Because we're 4,000 years old, that's why. We figure, just get it done, go back to the way that we used to have. Why do you think we were away for so long? We spent time learning. People think that galut, that exile, is just a penalty box until you can play well with others in the sandbox. And that is not what galut is. It's a terrible mistake. Galut is a learning process. Exile is a learning process. It is going away from home to learn from others and to start to gain elements that we were not necessarily open to when we were by ourselves in our land. We absorb those things into Israel. Consider the fact that the nation of Israel is the greatest repository of world culture that the world has ever seen. I mean, I'll tell you, as a Syrian Jew, right? From Halab, my family's from Halab, both sides of my family for 500 years. I don't know how that makes you feel, but I'm just telling you. Right? We sing songs in our prayers that were written by Muhammad Abdul Wahab. You know Abdul Wahab? We sing songs in our prayers written by Muhammad Abdul Wahab. One time he was, for those who don't know, Abdul Wahab was one of the most prolific songwriters in Egypt, in the Arab world, had a career that spanned over 50 years. He was one of the greatest creators of music in the Arab world in the 20th century. I'm not exaggerating. You've heard of Kulthum, right? So she's saying he wrote 10 songs for her. He didn't want to. But Abdul Nasser Mahshamo, he made Abdul Wahab write 10 songs for Kulthum. One of the most famous songs of Kulthum that was written by Abdul Wahab is the Umri. You know Anta Umri? Anta Umri, Anta Umri. You know that? So these are the stars, right? These are the of Egypt, of the Arab world. That has nothing to do with us. But their songs we sing every Shabbat. In we sing Abdullah. So once, years ago, Abdullah came to UCLA. My family lives in Los Angeles. My mother's family all live in Los Angeles. And he came into UCLA because they were going to award him, some award. So my grandfather went to go hear him speak and to receive this award at UCLA because my grandfather is a huge fan of Abdul Wahab. He's a Hazan. So afterwards, he had an opportunity to go up to Abdul Wahab, and he says to Abdul Wahab, I want you to know that your songs will live forever in our prayers. Abdul Wahab looks at him, he says, where are my royalties? The reality is that my grandfather is absolutely right. They don't even sing his songs in Cairo anymore. They call his music classical music. For us, it's Shabbat. And this is not just me. And this is not just Syrian. I'm sure you recognize things that we took from the places that we were, whether it was in Rhodes or it was in Turkey or wherever it was. And we draw that, and it's alive in us and dead there. The Jewish people are the greatest repository of social endeavors on this planet that this planet has ever seen. We still name our months. The month is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, right? We just finished Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz. These names. What are these names? Torah doesn't use these names. Torah says Chodesh Rishon, Chodesh Sheni, Chodesh Shlishi. The first month, second month, third month. Doesn't call it Nisan, Tammuz, Ab. What are those? Babylonian months. The Babylonians. That's how they named their months. So we took it. You think in Babylon and Babel and Iraq, they're still calling the months these names? No, we didn't. You get what I'm saying? We are the repository of the world. And it is important for us to recognize that we have a long memory and that what you are watching now in Israel is a 75-year-old startup that is doing pretty darn well for 75 years. I tell you, I mean, it's way ahead of what it should be doing for 75 years. But also it's important to recognize that we must have patience. It's hard to tell a people that have been around for 4,000 years to have patience. We're getting a bit antsy, especially now that we are back home, especially now that we do have a place on this earth that belongs to us, the most prominent and powerful Jewish presence on the planet. We are a bit antsy, and it's okay for us to recognize that and accept it. But it is also important for us to recognize that we are beginning again, and that our country will go through growing pains. And this is not foreign to new countries. This country is also still young. This one, still young. It's not going so great at the moment, but it's holding. The United States of America, I always say, it's like 50 countries. It'll work itself out. Please God. It's also been through civil war. Again, not Chas Shalom that we should see it. Simply to point out, growing pains are part of the development of any entity that is that serious and that important. Grab your popcorn. Be patient. Recognize that the covenant between God and Israel is alive and strong till this day, till this hour. And we sometimes forget it. But you and I are living evidence of the reality of that covenant and that it is still running till now. And when we recognize that, we understand what Israel means to us. It's not just a political entity. It's not just a religious center. It's home. And every one of us, no matter how far we've been away or how long we've been away, we're expats. It's home. And we're a family. And we cannot remind ourselves of that often enough. It must orient our minds and guide our hearts. Because if it doesn't, we will forget that we are family. And we will forget that that is our home and that it is precious and that we have to hold it with all that we've got at all costs. And we will get stuck and lose the forest for the trees. And we will get stuck in the politics and the religiosity and the philosophical dilemmas and issues. And we will lose our attentiveness to the presence of God in our lives, in our people, and in our land. And it's just a matter of fine-tuning to be able to remember it and feel it and accept that it is genuinely there. It is a matter of focus for us to be able to breathe and hold in our hearts 3,000 years of history. And we're doing, I would say, we're doing well considering the circumstances. Can we do better? We could always do better. But we are doing well. The very fact that it's a full room tonight on a Thursday evening, right? We're doing pretty good. So these are just some opening thoughts that I wanted to share with you about Israel, about what it means to us, about our relationship to it, especially given the current situations with it. And I look very much forward to Shabbat, and being able to open up some thought around what it is that we're reading now in the Torah, and some of the elements of our future. And with that, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. And I thank you. Yes.
Isn't it the purpose of the 7 bakashot that start with Tekah B'Shofar Gadol till Modim? Isn't that the purpose to remind us of what you're reminding us of?
Yes, of course it is. Tell me your name, I'm sorry.
Renee Levy.
Renee, of course it is. Renee is asking, aren't the section of Berachot that we say every day in the Amidah, Tekah B'Shofar Gadol Cherutenu Sanes, and so on, isn't that meant to remind us and focus our minds on Israel? Yes, it is, but here's the problem. The problem is that we say it every day, and we can probably say it by heart, we go through it, and we don't always focus on what it is that we're saying. Right? So yes, it is important. Yeah.
The second part, I wanted to thank you, because after hearing you tonight, when I'm going to say it again tomorrow morning, it will have a whole different meaning. Good afternoon.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Rabbi. It seems that you use the terms B'nai Israel and B'nai Abraham pretty interchangeably. I'm wondering if you see a distinction there.
If I see a distinction between Abraham and Israel, yes. Not in terms of the people, but in terms of the responsibilities. Because when we talk about ourselves as B'nai Abraham, which the Hachamim do, right? When we talk about ourselves as children of Abraham, we are focusing on that covenant that HaKadosh Baruch Hu established Abraham that does not differentiate between practice, adherence, commitment, and so on. You're born a Jew, you're always a Jew, no matter you like it or not, that's the way it is. So we find that manifest halachically, because we all know that we focus a great deal on observance, commitment, even if I don't observe, my knowledge that I'm a Jew, my commitment to the Jewish people, my commitment to, we have all, yeah. But you know, of course, that as far as the Brit Avraham is concerned, you could have an individual whose mother is Jewish, who has absolutely no idea that they're Jewish. I mean, Zero idea that they're Jewish. I know people like this. My Beit Din right now is converting a young man, 22 years old, who did not know that he was Jewish until he was 17. Didn't know that he was Jewish. Why? His grandmother was a survivor of the Holocaust. She wanted to make sure to have no connection whatsoever to the Jewish people, that this shouldn't happen to her again. Her son's name, this is her grandson that I'm talking about. So this boy, his name is Josh, his father came to synagogue with him. And his father's Jewish, obviously, because his mother's Jewish, but this boy is not Jewish because his father married an Anki. What's the father's name? Chris. So this boy, till he was 17 years old, did not know that he was Jewish. Did not know that his father and his grandmother was Jewish, right? Didn't have any idea. So I know these people. Now, if you have somebody who could be, his mother's Jewish, right? She never told. She lived in a place where, now this guy wants to get married to a Jewish woman. What do we tell him? Okay, I say, we don't tell him, listen, first you need to sit and learn. We don't say, I'm going to send you to yeshiva. We don't tell him, he can marry. And if they marry, whether the guy wants to marry, if a person marries and there's witnesses, they're married. They need a get. Why am I telling you that? That's Bnei Abraham. Bnei Israel, when we talk about Bnei Israel, it includes Sinai. Sinai includes the Torah. And there was a second element of covenant that was established at Sinai. It doesn't take away the Brit of Abraham Avinu, as I just explained to you, that still runs. But there's an element of that. Where Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I want you to keep the mitzvot. You don't keep the mitzvot, it's not going to look good. That's what it says in the Torah, we'll be honest, right? That's what Kadosh Baruch Hu says in the Torah, keep the mitzvot. You don't keep the mitzvot, not going to look good. Okay, we can feel how we feel about it. But that's part of our people. And whether we accept it or not, whether we like it or not, we can't explain it away, right? We have to deal with it. We can decide not to look at it, but it's there. And that's the element of Israel. The element of Israel includes Sinai always, and includes mitzvot. And the mitzvot are part of the covenant of our people. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. You will always be brought through. But as Yosef Yerushalmi said, a professor at Harvard, even if there is only one Jew left in the world, God is not forsaken. That's not how we want things to be. And it's a very narrow reading of the covenant. It doesn't mean that there isn't casualty. It doesn't mean that there isn't punishment. It doesn't mean that there isn't hardship and difficulty. That's also there. I don't want to make everything sunshines and rainbows, right? I mean, we have to deal with the reality of our people, and our people have been through a great deal of casualty. There's no question about that. But the survival of our people, the presence of our people, that's Bnei Abraham. Because that runs no matter what. Yeah. Yes.
Back to Abraham and the land. If Hashem loved him so much and everything, and he got land, then why did Moshe get the Torah instead?
That's very good. So what would you expect Moshe to have gotten?
The land, and Abraham gets the Torah, because if Abraham is loved a lot by Hashem, then he should be getting the Torah.
So that's an interesting assumption, because what we learn is exactly the opposite. Harambam, Maimonides, says exactly the opposite of that. The most important thing was the land. The Torah was only a guide to how we should live in the land. But the land is fundamental. So you know what Harambam says? Maimonides is 12th century Spanish rabbi, probably one of the greatest rabbis we've ever seen, if you ask me anyway. Yeah? What does Harambam say? He says this, by the way, if you want to look it up, he says it at the end of the first chapter of Hilchot Avodah Zarah, when he goes through Abraham Avinu's development. He says, Umehavat Adonai otanu, and from the fact that God loved us, Umishvuato shenishba Abraham Avinu, and because he made a pact, he made an oath to Abraham Avinu, right? So all that he's doing is because of that pact and love and oath. Asa Moshe Rabbeinu. He made this Moshe Rabbeinu character. Ushlaho. And he sent him. kedei lehodia derech avodato, to teach us how to serve him. So the land is the foundation. It is what we need. And in that land, how do we serve? What do we do? What are our adherents? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Okay. I guess one last. We'll do one more question, if there is one. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure.
So just to develop that point a little more, there's many rabbis, there's a long school of thought from religious Zionist rabbis, including the Ramban, Yaakov Emden, and a whole lot more. Do you believe that there is a limit to how close a Jew can get to Hashem if you don't live on the land?
That's a good question. I don't, so it's a good question. Did everybody hear the question? Everybody hear the question. There are definitely sources that seem to imply that if one is living outside of the land, there is some kind of cap as to how close a person can be to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But I believe that those are read often out of context, because it is assuming in those texts, right, that if a person is outside of the contextual reality of a full aspect of being Israel, right, which is in the land, right, which is the ultimate context of being Israel, they are influenced by the external elements of what happens outside that land. That's the assumption, but it is not the rule, or it is not the emphatic definition of what it is that it means for a person to be connected to God outside the land. And the reality is that as far as the Talmud is concerned, certainly as far as Harambam is concerned, the criteria that determines the closeness of someone to God or not is not the presence in the land. It is their conscious awareness of God and the level of knowledge of God. Where do we learn this? From Moshe Rabbeinu. Because it says in Parashat Kitisa, right? It says in Parashat Kitisa that Moshe Rabbeinu pleads for the people of Israel because of the golden calf debacle, yes? Right? And he finds this wonderful window of opportunity where God has said to Abraham, he said to Moshe, Moshe, I hear you, I will do what you've asked me to do. And Moshe asks for more. He says, that too I'm going to do, Moshe, I'm going to do this for you. And Moshe sees that God is opening him up, he's softening, and he takes an opportunity. He says, my Lord, I want to see you. I want to know you. He says, show me your ways. Why? Because he asked, he said, show me your glory. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, you can't be a human being and see that. So Moshe says, so then let me see you in the way that I can understand you, the way that I can know you, through your creative output. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says today, I could do that. But what's important to recognize is that the way that Moshe Rabbeinu asks the question is as follows. This is the language. He says to God, Hodi'ani na derachecha, show me your ways, ve'eda'acha, and I will know you. Says Harambam in the Moreh Nebuchim, Mikan lamadnu. From this we learn that da'at derachav, that knowing God's ways is how we come to know him. And what is God's ways, says Harambam? Well, we hear that from God's answer to Moshe Rabbeinu. What does he say to Moshe? He says, I can do this for you, Moses. Ani avir kol tuvi al panecha. I'm going to pass before you, Moses, kol tuvi. What is kol tuvi? All of my good. That's kol tov, right? Kol tuvi. So Harambam says in the Moreh Nebuchim, what's kol tuvi? What is that? Listen how beautiful Harambam explains that. Listen how beautiful. Harambam says it must mean that God showed Moses the entirety of creation. All of its details, kol prat u prat, he says all of its details, v'kishuram ze bazeh, and their interconnections with each other. It essentially means he showed him the matrix of the universe. How does Harambam know that? It's quite a creative answer. I mean, how do you know that Kol Tuvi means that? He said very simple. At the end of Genesis, it says, Vayar Elohim, God saw it Kol Asher Asa, Kol Vine Tov Meod. God saw everything he made and it was good. Kol Tov, Kol Tuvi, that's Kol Tuvi. So how do we come to know God? By studying his world. That's how we know. By studying the world that he made, you come to know the face of God. And why do I say that to you? Because of your question. You come close to God by knowing him. Because after Moshe Rabbeinu says, I want to see your ways, I'll know you, he says, so that I will find favor in your eyes. Says Harambam, and how does one find favor in the eyes of God? By knowing him. And that is the connection. As a nation, it is best for us to do it at home, because there are no impediments. It is the only place. This is important to hear, right? A person can connect with God if he knows God. There are no impediments or barriers. But as a nation, when we are not home, we are not fully free to do so. We carve out for ourselves communities and environments in which we hope to be able to do so, but we are not free to do so. There's a great diary, you know Herman Wouk, the writer, the playwright, novelist. So he wrote, This Is My God. Have you read This Is My God? Yeah. If you haven't, read it. But he also wrote a book called The Will to Live On. You should read that too. Two excellent, I'm telling you, excellent books about Judaism. And in The Will to Live On, he tells a story. He died at 101 in Palm Springs a few years ago. He lived a long time. So he was visiting Ben Gurion in Israel. And he spent a week on a kibbutz with Ben Gurion. And as Herman is ready to leave, Ben Gurion says to him, Herman, you must move here. You will be free here. Herman says, free? You're spending all your time worried about your enemies, their incursions, there's terrorism, there's all kinds of crazy things we're talking about. He said, I didn't say safe. I said free. And that's a very important reality. What Ben Gurion was saying is a Jew can be fully a Jew, unabashedly and completely free in that land. And that helps us connect with God. Okay.
Thank you, everybody. I want to thank again Rabbi Dweck. He's again speaking many more times. You're all invited to attend those. In the meantime, thank you to, again, Becky Benaroya for continued meaningful support. And I invite you all to wine and cheese and stick around as long as you like.